Welcome to Braindrop by VCOM Solutions. Each episode, we talk to IT leaders and experts, explore recent projects, and learn from their triumphs and challenges. We hope today's episode provides you with a unique window into the world of IT, where creativity meets problem solving and technology drives businesses forward. I'm your host, Jethro Castillo. Now let's drop into today's conversation. Today on Braindrop by VCOM Solutions, I am joined by Jeff Green, the CIO at Strike, a company that provides end-to-end pipeline, facilities, and energy infrastructure solutions. Jeff has decades of experience in information technology across many disciplines, projects, and industries, creating and growing teams that bring business value as well as meet and exceed the expectations of the customer. Jeff, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So before we jump into tech and IT and everything that goes into that, I'm curious, what kind of fills your time outside of IT and tech?
Usually it's a lot of stuff with my family. We work out quite a bit and play a little basketball here and there at this point. A little older, so knees aren't as good as they used to be, but trying to.
Do you have a favorite team?
I'm a Dallas Mavericks fan.
Well, you are kind of in a good place now. They're kind of really exciting to watch, in my opinion, at least. I was born and raised in the Bay Area, so the Warriors are my team. And so I kind of consider myself very lucky over the last decade.
Yeah, you guys have had a really good run.
Yeah, and I think we're still hoping that the run continues. But, you know, I feel like it's starting to transition into the next set of teams and players. So.
Right, yeah. They're kind of that core group of Clay and Steph and Draymond are aging out at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm grateful for the run, so I can't really complain for sure. But awesome. I'm glad to kind of meet a basketball nerd also in this world of IT. Not many people like that. So, but we can jump into tech. How did you get started in IT?
Honestly, it was growing up. It was kind of my fallback career. I honestly wanted to be a doctor, what I always had hoped to be growing up. But kind of just so happened that I got into college and things didn't go as I hoped they'd go. And so I was like, I've always been in IT. I always had computers, playing with computers at home and stuff like that as growing up and stuff. And so building them and all that kind of stuff, just kind of fell into it per se. Actually, my first job was and the computer technical side of it was I did in-home warranty repair for Dell and compact computers. That's how I got started.
I also, when I was in college, was gearing up to be a doctor. I studied pre-med all 4 years. Is there, I know you're like deep into your career now, so it's kind of a strange question to ask, but any sort of regrets, or have you enjoyed the way your career has kind of fleshed out now? Looking back?
For me, not really. Are there things I would change? Yes. But as far as regrets, no. I've got to work with a lot of great people, a lot of different industries, and, used a lot of technologies throughout that career. So I would really say no, not really for me.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that's awesome. And with such a long career, what's kind of your favorite part about working in IT? What keeps you kind of motivated and coming back?
I think it is the ever-changing face of IT. Today's, the last couple of years, it's been AI, right? I mean, everybody's talking about artificial intelligence. How's it going to help us? How's it going to go from how is it going to help us to they're worried about it taking jobs and things of that nature. 10 years ago everything was around the analytics world. Building models and data scientists were the big thing. So again, just watching over the last 20 plus years here, everything changed, and knowing that things are going to constantly change because technology is always evolving. There's always something new. There's always something better, and making our lives easier with technology. So I think that constant change is what keeps me motivated and drives me to still do what I do.
Yeah, and I think that's, I think it's very unique to this industry or this part of the business, IT. It moves so much faster than anything else, technology in general. that being said, it sounds so exciting, but that change isn't or that's not for everybody because, it requires you to kind of keep up with it constantly. And so for you, what do you kind of do to keep up with the ever changing environment of IT and tech?
Yeah. So for me, I do a lot of reading, and a lot of research. I use the research tools. Like the main one I use is probably Gartner. They're pretty big in the tech industry around what and the latest and greatest things that are coming out. What's the new things? What are the trends? Which direction are people going with? Whatever it is. But it also, I think, with that research, when I'm looking, you can go out on the web and you can do a search, obviously, and you can find all kinds of things. But the other thing is, I'm a member of quite a few different peer groups, CIO peer groups, and we obviously are talking to each other. And I think that peer engagement is a big piece of that also, as far as staying on top and, hey, what are you hearing? Well, I'm hearing this. What are you hearing? Oh, I'm hearing this, so you get a lot of good ideas from that direction or from that avenue also.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think a lot of guests would agree that that's almost maybe number one or at the top of their list in terms of learning, because there's no way, it's kind of hard to kind of keep everything on track. But if everyone works together, it kind of becomes a lot easier. And so being active and engaged in those groups, completely agree. You mentioned that, especially with AI coming out, or not coming out, but being huge in the last couple of years, there's a lot of excitement with how it can help us, but also a lot of fear with how it could be used. And so I kind of want to bounce that to you. What are you most excited about when it comes to tech? And on the other side, what kind of concerns you, or what are you trying to look out for?
Yeah. So from a technical standpoint, as far as, just kind of staying with that vein of AI there, again, the potential for capabilities that we can do as a, not just, but even across, let's equate it to the business side of it, the operations for us. We can do so much with that from the standpoint of analyzing. One of the things we're looking at potentially implementing is there's a partnership that Google's been working on where they are actually taking satellite imagery and looking at, for example, methane plumes in the West Texas area, and being able to predict when those assets, based on the amount of methane plumes coming up, when those assets are going to need maintenance. That's all being done with AI and machine learning there. The things like that are what I would say I consider those the good things in technology. From a bad standpoint, obviously the breaches are getting more and more, cyber breaches, loss of consumer information, that kind of stuff. The hackers are using AI against us essentially at this point. So if you're not using AI to prevent those types of attacks, then you're already behind the 8 ball. You're already behind the game and they're ahead of you. I get daily emails, on some of the latest cyber attacks and everything. And it's all over the world, but I think there's some of the negative parts of AI that not everybody may or may not know about, but it's the cyber attacks and the intensity and the way that they're now engineering those attacks using AI.
I love how you said that, because I think, a lot of people are afraid of the negative side of AI. But the negative side of AI is already happening. And so it's not that, oh, we can't use AI because it's dangerous. We kind of have to use AI because that's the only thing that can go against the bad uses of AI, which the bad guys are already using to their full effect. And so we kind of, like you said, behind the 8 ball. And it's interesting. It feels like the bad guys are always more coordinated or more or are faster with their utilization of new technology. And on the flip side, we're much slower there. And so I think my fear is that we're not moving fast enough to counter sort of the bad guys using new pieces of technology.
Right. And I would agree with that. I mean, the adoption, again, if you're not adopting some form of AI in your business at this point, you're 2 years behind where you should be at this, it's just a fact of life right now. And if you're not using it, then you're just falling every day. You're not using it. You're falling further and further behind. And it's going to get to a point where you can't, as a company, keep up without using it. And I think we're close to that point.
Yeah, it's starting to feel like that too, for sure. I agree. Which is crazy because not that AI is a recent development, but obviously the popularity of it and its usage is. But it always feels like technology is moving faster and faster and faster, and so you just have to move and keep up faster and faster and faster, or you'll fall behind faster and faster and faster. I wonder, if there's a balance there, or if it's always going to be that stressful and it's always we're going to have to know things more and more and more. But I guess, that's why we use technology, or we use AI, because AI can do things so much faster than we can. I can't speak too much on this because I'm not an expert, but it feels like it's hitting that critical point where if you don't have it or are not using it for your environment, you're already going to be considered outdated and obsolete. So I agree with you there for sure. Well, let's jump into you and kind of your team. So talk to us about your IT team and environment. How long have you been there? How many team members do you have? And how many employees ultimately rely on your team?
So I have been with Strike for going on 7 years now. I've been in the CIO role for just over 2 years now. Previously, I had a large background in analytics and business intelligence, so I have a strong affinity to that group. As far as my team, currently we have 15 employees full-time that are on the team. But then we have a couple of managed services groups that help us out. So total employees, within the IT is about somewhere around 40, with the managed services teams or the contractors per se who work for us. We support an organization of about 1,200 employees across the United States. We have 13 offices across the U.S., but we're centered out of, or headquarters out of the Houston area.
So you got a relatively small team for a relatively large group of people.
Yes, we do. So the part of that makes it where we can do what we do is I have a lot of seasoned employees. The tenure of the employees themselves is long. But like in IT, you don't find this a lot nowadays, but we have most of our employees are between 3 to 5 years or longer in the with Strike. So trying to build a culture of what we can do to help people and want to stay. And I think that's a testament to what we're doing as a company, and what we're doing as an IT group is we've got people that want to stay. We don't have the people that leave, if they stay for a year or two and then leave. My team has all been here for, like I said, all of them have been here over 3 years, and most of them more than 5 years.
Yeah, wow. Why do you think it's not as common now I always go back to basketball because it's the thing I know the best, but loyalty used to be such a huge thing, and now it's all about jumping to the best sort of environment for yourself, and people are changing teams every 1 or 2 years. Why do you think that's kind of been the same thing in the working world also? Why is loyalty and culture so much harder to find?
It's a great question. I think, if I'm just my personal opinion, I think that the companies have gone away from being loyal to the employees. So therefore the employees are no longer loyal to the company. You find the larger companies like, for example, Google. Google does all kinds of things for their employees. So they are well taken care of. And so they are invited to stay for that reason. I think the companies that again take care of their employees, they're going to see the employees stay longer. And we've gone through some hard times with COVID and all that kind of stuff, as a lot of the oil and gas industry did. But, through that, just because of the culture we had built as a company, our employees stayed with us, even through the down times.
I think that's again, it's just your opinion, but I think that's a very fair answer for sure. Well, okay. So what does your day-to-day kind of look like as CIO of Strike?
A lot of meetings, usually, a lot of strategy meetings and things of that nature with a lot of the business leaders. We're right now we're working through what's our strategy for the next couple of years going to be. What are we going to do as a company. While the majority of our work is in the oil and gas industry, we are looking to branch out and move into other areas outside of oil and gas, but still in the energy. We do have some work we're doing with alternative energy from, wind farms and from solar farms and things of that nature. But we're also looking at some other areas to branch out into as we grow as a company. So a lot of my day-to-day is around strategy, and then also company strategy, but also IT strategy. When I inherited or took over the department, we inherited a lot of technical debt. A lot of our using paper, in the field, even, people were using paper to document what they're doing. All of our timesheets were done on paper. And so over the last couple of years, our initiatives have been around getting us to a more modern platforms and moving off of a lot of the legacy applications we have. So on a day-to-day, it's really around that strategy of where we're going, what do we got left to do, and then what does tomorrow look like, or the future state of strike.
Yeah. I feel like IT has a really interesting balance with both putting out fires and sort of staying ahead of the game and being at the forefront. I can only imagine that your role is a very, very stressful role. But so props to you and kudos to that. Very interesting for sure. I'm curious, what is kind of, we can go two ways with this. What's a recent IT project your team took on, or what is an IT project that you're most proud of? Why did you take it on, and what were your goals for that project?
Yeah, so it's a project we're currently in the middle of right now. We're getting close to the tail end of it. But like I was alluding to earlier, previously or prior to this, for the last 15 years, the company's been doing, in the oilfield services area, there are what they call field tickets, and it's not to be confused with a ticket you put in for an IT support piece. And so with these field tickets, this is actually how we track and our clients sign off on a daily basis what we did on the jobs. Well, that was all being done on paper. And so what we've done is, over the last 6 months, is we're migrating the company to use iPads in the field and track all of this through an app on an iPad. And then subsequently in the back end, we're moving all the billing into our ERP system, which it was a homegrown system that was being used for that. And so, for us as an IT group, that's a huge win, because in the business side of it, on the operations, it's a huge time savings, and it's also a revenue generator, because we knew we were leaving revenue on the table because everything was being written down on a paper. We knew there were things that weren't being billed as they should be. And so overall, it's like say, with that time savings, in addition to the revenue generation, it's a large win for us as an IT group.
Yeah, and I like how you point that out, because I think the IT used to kind of be almost behind the curtain, if you will, or kind of just on the side, just kind of doing the operational things to keep the business going. But now the IT side has to very directly be linked with revenue generation, time savings, which leads to revenue generation, or cost savings at least. And so it's kind of like, in order for your initiatives to kind of proceed, you kind of have to line that up and kind of come up with a business plan or a business idea to get certain IT initiatives moving. It's not enough to just say, oh, look, nice, shiny tech, let's do that. It's, well, what's the ROI? What's the return? How will this actually help us in the long run? So
if you're going to, I was just going to say, if you're going to survive as a CIO, in today's world, no matter what industry it is, you have to bring business value to the company as part of your IT plan. Because if you're just, like you said, if you're just doing those initiatives to bring in the shiny new tech, it's not going to sell, and it's not going to go, and you're not going to be with that company long. You have to bring the business value and understand the business and how can IT integrate and help them make their job simpler.
IT is definitely, it's not enough to just know a lot about computer and tech and software and cybersecurity. You also have to understand the storytelling, the marketing, the business side to be able to pitch it well. So it's the role definitely had to have evolved, and it's not enough to just be a computer nerd, if you will. You also kind of have to be very business savvy to succeed. And I think that's a change for the better, in my opinion, for sure. When I know you're in the midst of this project, but I kind of like to divide projects into stages, kind of the planning and implementation part, and then the actual ongoing outcomes. Obviously, it's still happening, so we'll see if you can answer the second half of that question. But the first part, when it came down to prioritizing, planning, and then kind of implementing this, what are some things that went well, and then what were some things that were that posed a challenge?
Similar to, I think everybody encounters this with a software project, an implementation project, especially when you're replacing a system that's been in place a long time. There's a lot of, this is the way we've always done it. And so you can plan and you can, try to anticipate a lot of that stuff. But, ultimately there are business processes that have to change when you do a new implementation of a software. And so I think in the planning you can try to plan for that as much as possible, but you're still going to run into those things where you have to make course corrections throughout the project. And so with this, like I said, that old system had been in place for about 15 years, and this is the way we've always done it since the inception of the company. And then battling or using your relationships with the business and operation teams to really move that needle forward and go, okay, I understand this is the way you've always done it, but we did some piloting, with various groups. You don't want to, what I would say is from that standpoint also is you don't do a mass rollout to the entire company whenever you do a project like this. You do it in phases, exactly as you were talking about. So phase one for us was essentially a pilot with one of our smaller groups, got them on board, and then they become your champion within the rest of the business saying, hey, these guys did this. It saved us this much time, and we're seeing things are so much easier than they were, using the paper for this project it was. So, like I say, planning is great and everything, but you got to be prepared to do course corrections where necessary. So I think those are the things that I would take away from this, and from most projects are like that.
Yeah, no, I think it's almost a no-brainer when you put it like that. The question I always like to that always comes to my head is like, how do you enforce change when people are so resistant to change? And for me, at least, it's like, well, show proof that it works, right? And if it shows proof that it works, then of course I'm going to kind of want to lean into that. And so to kind of not just be like, all right, we believe that this works, and then the whole company has to adopt it. You go, all right, we're going to have a very core group of people. We're going to show that it works. And so then it's no longer a change of resistance. It's like a change of, wait, I want that because their lives are so much easier than mine. And so I kind of really I feel like it is a no-brainer, and I feel like it is common sense, but it's almost the first time I went, oh yeah, why, that makes sense. Phase it into small groups and then kind of open it up. And I so much tech does that, right? You have that beta, and then you have the alpha, and then you have the full release. And so I feel like that was, I don't know why I'm just like, oh yeah, that sounds so revolutionary, but I feel like that is kind of one of the best ways to go about rolling something out effectively with the least amount of resistance.
Yep, for sure. If you've got a large organization or even a small organization, the phased approach for any rollout is always going to go better. The other part of that is it gives you time if there was something that was, let's say you go through that first group and there's something that didn't go well or didn't go as planned. You've got time to make a course correction again, like I was talking about, and say, okay, this didn't work. Or we sit down and we do a retrospective on it, after what we call a pilot. We sit down and do a retrospective and say, okay, what worked, what didn't work. As we move to the next phase or next group, we're going to implement this. We're going to make these changes because we learned A, B, and C from that group.
Yeah, you're able to course correct with a lot less risk because you're affecting a lot less people, and you get to kind of figure that out before it becomes full blown. Yeah, absolutely. So you're still definitely in the process of it. So I'm going to ask this question, but maybe you can't answer it. Have there already been outcomes that you have seen directly that kind of have improved ongoing operations?
Yeah. So I would answer that yes. Well, we are still, we're 85% complete with the project. We'll be done by the end of April, maybe the first or second week there in May. But we've already seen the benefits and the time savings, whereas, I'd say time savings. And then one thing I didn't talk about earlier was the accuracy of the data. Obviously coming into the system where somebody's no longer hand keying in or translating what somebody wrote. And I use the word translate, and it really is. If you saw some of these guys handwriting, I mean, if you ever worked with construction workers, they're just as bad as a doctor in their handwriting, because that's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to get the job done and trying to, move on to the next piece of the project or whatever they're trying to do to get it executed. So, like say, translating that handwriting into the system and keying that in, we've been able to free up people that no longer have to key that data in. Now they're reviewing the data, just looking at it, making sure it's more accurate, more correct. And then again, speed in which we've been able to, for example, our payroll team has been able to cut their processing time down from a couple of days to a few hours on processing payroll, because they no longer have to go back and forth on, somebody's hours are wrong, or calling out to the field and going, hey, you put an 8 here. Did you mean 8 or did you mean 10 or, whatever. So we're already seeing the benefits, like I say, in those time savings and better data coming through. And then again, which means subsequently, we're already seeing the benefits in the revenue side of it, being able to bill more accurately to our customers and being able to bill faster to our customers.
It's kind of bad practice to look back and go, oh, only if we had done this sooner. But it is, to not just repeat what I just said there, but it is kind of crazy. It's since the inception of the company, this has been the way it's always been done for this long. It's probably almost night and day to you guys to be like, oh yeah, wow, this kind of changes everything in terms of efficiency, and now we can actually do more things than having to do things just by hand and manual, for sure.
It's always been one of those things I looked at. Sorry, I was just going to say, it's always been one of those things as I looked when I joined the company, I was like, we're still doing what? So it's, for me, it's always been something I wanted to do, but just had to have the right people in place from a leadership standpoint to move it forward.
I that is something I hear in IT a lot, is always like, we're still doing it that way. Why are we back in the 19th century, if you will? But yeah, I guess, like we said before, change is hard to enact, and especially if it's something that is tried and true, to kind of challenge that can receive resistance. And so having that right team in place, and then the right priorities in place, and then also just being able to execute in a way that doesn't make people feel alienated. There's a lot that goes into big changes like that, for sure. You said this project was going to kind of end relatively soon. And that you guys are kind of strategizing for the next 2 years. What are kind of some goals and projects moving forward? What do you want to kind of accomplish for the business?
So we've got a few more projects this year, and then throughout the next 2 years planned out. But I mean, some of the major things, like I said, we inherited quite a bit of technical debt. When I say that, I mean, like for example, we're running on very old hardware in our data centers. So one of the things we're doing this year is we're actually redoing the hardware in the data center and actually migrating our data center to, currently have two. We have a co-location. So we have one data center as our primary, and then we have secondary as our backup or disaster recovery. We're migrating that into one data center with new hardware, more reliable hardware. And then our disaster recovery is actually going to be in a public cloud. We haven't decided which one yet, so I'm not gonna do any name dropping there, but we're picking a public cloud to use for our disaster recovery. So again, that's modernization, also cost reduction, while the hardware will be expensive, puts us in a much better place from a reliability standpoint going forward. We started to see that old hardware starting to just stop working, can't find parts for it, that kind of stuff. So most of the projects over the next couple of years are going to be like that: modernization, more things we can do around digital. Another project we've got going in combination with the businesses we're working on. Currently, our forecasting tool is Excel, not uncommon to a lot of companies.
Right.
We're actually building a web application in conjunction with the business unit, building a web application to move everything to the web so that they can do it up there as opposed to running everything through spreadsheets. We've got a migration of our intranet coming up this year. We're migrating off of an on-premise system to again, cloud-based system. A lot of the initiatives we've been doing are moving us off of on-premise applications so that we don't have to support them, number one. And number two, get the reliability of the SaaS application by doing that. And again, you don't have to support applications. You don't have to, continually build. You're getting all the updates that every other customer gets, kind of thing, as opposed to the on-premise software and stuff. So those initiatives over the next couple of years are going to be continuing down that path, along with some of those big initiatives around replacing the hardware, replacing the end user laptops, getting us back on a schedule of that, so our employees can do what they need to do.
Yeah. Obviously, the one con to kind of going from on-premise to cloud is you kind of lose that control. You kind of leave it up to whoever runs the cloud application, if you will. I was about to ask a question, but I feel like that con does not really outweigh the countless and abundant amount of pros that comes with kind of moving into a more digitalized cloud environment.
Right. Yeah, there's always going to be cons for both sides, pros and cons both ways. And so I think for us, with a smaller staff and everything, I think the pros for us outweigh the cons.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. You said you were kind of the CIO for starting almost 2 years ago. How, and there's kind of a lot of initiatives happening and a lot of initiatives happening in the near future. How do you go about prioritizing and figure out which things you should be doing first versus that? Or, why did you decide to do the project you're currently working on first and then kind of the other project second or third? Where do you go about figuring out? Because in a perfect world, you would just do everything, right? But
right.
Obviously with a small team, you kind of have to prioritize. So how do you go about doing that?
So it's another one of those things where we work closely with the business. We started not long after I took over as CIO. We started doing quarterly meetings with them to go through each group's shared services group and operations side. What do you need from IT? What are your projects you would like for us to work on? And then we have that large meeting as a group, and we let them decide, from the standpoint of the major projects that we're going to work on. Now, not to say that there aren't some projects, like I was talking about the hardware refresh, they don't care about that, right? It's not something that, why are you doing that kind of thing? So some of those like that we have to get done, I'll step in and go, look, this is a priority because of X, Y, and Z. We are running on 10-year-old hardware, starting to break. We can't buy hard drives to replace them. We let them decide what are the major projects we should be working on. Like for example, that ticketing project we're talking about. While I brought it up to the group, it was their decision that we should work on that. Actually, that was at a CIO, CEO level decision that was made. This is the project we need to put first. So I think if you have the right relationships and you're having those meetings, I think that's the right way to really be integrated in the business. And then again, helps to show that value of IT, because we're working on this project because you said it was the most important thing for us as a company. We're not setting the priorities. That was kind of the old way it was, is IT just worked on whatever they wanted to. And the business didn't necessarily get what they needed. So we're trying to reverse that and make sure they get what they need. And again, it's really about showing the value of IT, our users, what they're doing, and making their lives easier.
Yeah. And of course, being in alignment with the CEO or the business side of things that's the most important thing, right? It doesn't matter, like we said earlier in the podcast, it doesn't matter what you're doing if it's not in alignment with what the business needs. And so it's important to put that first, and then execute and then show that value, they can place more trust in that team, and then you can continue to do more and more impactful projects, right? I imagine you're a little bit antsy to go, okay, I can't wait for us to finally transition out of this whole, we're trying to just modernize, and then we can actually do a lot more big things with the modernized sort of environment we now have. So I have 2 more questions for you. The first is kind of a wish list question. Some guests don't actually really have an answer to this, and then I kind of just delete it from the actual podcast. But if you could have anything you wanted to help you do your job better, or support your team better, what would it be?
I know that I have any, I don't hate to say it, but I don't know that I have an answer to that one either. If I could have something, anything, it would probably be more time. More time in the day to accomplish everything we want to accomplish. There's so much we want to do, but we don't always have time and resources to do it. So if I had anything, it would be more resources and time.
Yeah. And ultimately, that is kind of the answer a lot of people come up with, which I think is a good thing. It means that with what you have, you're doing, in your mind, the best you possibly can. You're asking for the things that usually cannot be given, which is more time and more resources. But I think that's just a testament to your team and your experience and the leadership you have and the trust you place in your team. So I think that's a great answer nonetheless. And the final question is kind of I would say your soapbox, but you've kind of been on the soapbox for the last 35 minutes. So let's call this your super soapbox. To close, what are some of the greatest things you've learned in your career that you'd like to share with the audience?
I think a couple of things there. Greatest things that I've learned are that your people are the most important resource you have. And if you treat your people the right way, being a servant leader is important. I've always looked at it. It took me a couple of years of being a manager, but I learned it pretty early, I would say, in my career, that make sure your people know they're important to you and that they feel like they're valued. Because if they do, they're going to stay with you and they're going to be there through the hard times with you. It's just like a family, essentially. Same thing. Treat them like their family and they will stay with you through the hard times. They'll stay with you through the good times. But I think that's the most important thing I've learned is treat your people the right way. Be a good leader to them by being a servant and helping them achieve their goals. And again, if you do that, you can go anywhere and they'll come with you and they'll follow you. I'm trying to think of the quote I read recently, but basically it was around being a good leader, but I'm gonna mess it up. But basically it's, there's a difference between being a leader and a bad leader, essentially, and it's, how you treat your people. And if you treat them, you're not seen as a leader, you're seen as a friend and a mentor. Whereas a leader just tells his people what to do and they go do it. Kind of a tyrant style, per se. But I'm paraphrasing that badly, but it really is, people are your greatest resource. And relationships are the most important thing, even in the business world.
Even in the business world and even in the tech world. And I find that the most beautiful thing about a lot of these conversations, and you kind of always, you bring it home, is despite our industry and our department and the fact that we're deep in IT and we're deep in tech, it's always people first. And that's not just treating, like you said, it's not just treating your employees with respect, but it's also like, how can tech solve a people problem? How can we save more time for our people? How can we raise revenue? Because raising revenue means we're helping our employees and our customers better. And tech serves that. And so I just want to kind of wrap that up in a bow like that, because I think that's just such a beautiful realization every time, is that, yes, we are tech, but people always comes first. Well, Darnell will be joining us to kind of close things off, so don't go anywhere. But I just wanted to say thank you for your time, Jeff. This was an incredible conversation, and I look forward to keeping in touch and seeing how your impact continues to drive value to your organization. So thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, Jethro. Appreciate it.
Yep. Take care. VCOM Solutions is here to help make your IT projects and day-to-day operations as easy and efficient as possible. If you'd like to see how VCOM can help your organization save time and money, request a demo at vcomsolutions.com/demo. Do you work in IT? Be a guest on Braindrop. Go to vcomsolutions.com/Braindrop guest to sign up. Thanks again for dropping in. Don't forget to subscribe, and you can find us on social media at VCOM Solutions. Until next time.